There's so many varieties of potatoes, and when they mature can vary from variety. I'm harvesting mine now, and I'm going to show you how you can tell when it's time to harvest, how to store your potatoes, and we're also going to make a smashed potato side dish that I'm sure you'll love. You can actually get a couple of harvests off of one potato planting. The first one when the potato plant stops flowering or drops its blossoms. This is when you get the new potatoes. If you've mounded with mulch or compost, then it's super easy to harvest these new potatoes. You can just reach right in there and get what you're going to be using within the next few days, because these don't have a tough skin and they don't keep very good. Just keep in mind, whatever you harvest with new potatoes will just give you a smaller harvest of the main crop of potatoes. The second harvest is the main harvest. This is when your potatoes will keep longer because they have a tougher skin, they've been in the ground a little bit longer. Main crop potatoes should be harvested about 2 to 3 weeks after the foliage has wilted and started to turn brown. Another indication when your potatoes are ready is when these little fruits fall off. They look like little tomatoes because they belong to the nightshade family, which belongs to the tomato family, so they do look like little tomatoes. And they do contain seeds in them. Now what we plant is a seed potato. That's actually a tuber, where it's not really a seed. These contain the seeds, and the seeds in these is what the breeders use to create new varieties of potatoes. It's best to let the soil dry out a bit so that you're not working in wet soil. Wet soil can cause compaction, plus the potatoes will store longer if the soil's been allowed to dry out for a little bit. When you start to dig your potatoes, start on the edge and work your way in slowly. Otherwise, if you start in the middle, then you're more than likely going to just stab your potatoes and ruin them. I'm pretty happy with this little 3x3 section of this raised bed for producing potatoes. Plus, I already harvested about 6 weeks ago a bunch of new potatoes from this area. The fingerling potatoes are some of my favorites that we grow here because they do really well and they're very prolific here. We want our potatoes to store for a long time, so we don't ever want to spray them off with water. And we're going to cure these guys with the dirt on them for 2 weeks. We want to lay them out flat and put them in a cool place. That way it gives them time for their skins to harden. This is the curing process. Once your potatoes have cured for that 2 weeks, then you can brush that dirt off of them and store them in a bag, a potato bin, or whatever you have. And store them in a nice cool place. The cooler the better, but not in a refrigerator because that really is too cold and it ruins the texture of your potatoes. Storing your potatoes with a little bit of humidity is a good thing, but you never want to store your potatoes with apples because the fruit actually puts off an ethylene gas that spoils your potatoes. I'll save out a couple of these Red Norland and these Yukon Golds for planting fall potatoes. I'll need to do that within the next week because I need at least 90 days for these to develop before we have our first frost. If you have any that have a little sprout on them, then those are the ones that are already started and you can put them right in the ground. I had some extra grow bags and a little unused space this year, and I thought I would try growing potatoes in them again. I've grown potatoes in these pots years past without much success, but we had a nice spring. It was cooler and wetter than normal, so I thought I would try it again this year. Well, we have potatoes. So there's a decent amount of potatoes, but the bottom there's absolutely no potatoes. So it was only in the first about 8 inches of these bags. So lack of water, or it was too warm, or something. So they didn't go down very deep. All in all, a 20-gallon container. Not very many potatoes, so this first bag I'm not really impressed with. I did several different types of soils and potatoes. 7 bags, over 120 gallons of soil, and 6 pounds of potatoes is all I ended up with. We dumped out all 7 bags. One of them was a 5-gallon, the rest were 20 gallons. So that's roughly 120 gallons of soil. And so all of that really good soil that was purchased, bagged soil, and some compost, that's all I got out of it. And that's why I don't like growing potatoes in the springtime here in our area, because it's so hot that they just don't do very well. And so that was a lot of cost, but they do well in the fall time in these bags. So I'll actually save some of these and replant them in these bags and reuse this soil, just re-amend it with some compost. Now that we have our potatoes harvested and cleaned, it's time to make some smashed roasted potatoes. We want to boil them in water with just a little salt. Boil them just till a fork slides in easy. Place on a baking sheet and slightly cool. Smash with the back of a measuring cup, or if they're coolish, you can use your hand. Pour some good olive oil over the potatoes and sprinkle with some sea salt. Place in a 425-degree preheated oven and bake for 45 minutes or until the edges are crispy. We kind of like ours a little extra crispy. While the potatoes are baking, prepare an easy dressing. Chop about 1 tablespoon of chives and place these in a small bowl. I never measure because it always turns out just fine. Press about 3 to 5 cloves of garlic, depending on how much you really like garlic. Add about 2 tablespoons of sherry vinegar. Dollop in a spoonful of whole grain mustard. Stir and add a couple pinches of salt. If you want to take the tang out of this dressing, then you can add some olive oil, about 2 tablespoons. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. It's good either way. Once your potatoes are baked to your liking, serve up with the dressing.